Hello again. Welcome to episode 3 of my JuMagic Park series. This is a series where I showcase some of my favorite decks that stood the test of time. Instead of fragile novelty, these decks presented a challenge and intrigue that kept me coming back to tinker and toy with as I perfected my list. I have long been a rampant brewer, frequently building decks to play them just a handful of times before getting bored and dismantling them. So these decks represent some of my proudest creations. I am your guide, as always, Sagathan, and I hope you enjoy my mono-green Reanimator deck. This deck is a joke. I don't mean this kind of joke. No, not that kind of joke either. This deck is a good joke. So, what makes a good joke? Well, first, you need setup, and then you need a punchline. And it's important that your punchline be something that is at least in some part unexpected. It should be related to your setup in a way that makes it not a total non sequitur, but also not boring. So what's the joke here? Well, for setup, we have a mono green deck. 39 lands, 12 ramp spells, big hitters like Thunderfoot Baloth and Avenger of Zendikar, huge draw spells like Rishkar's Expertise and Vaultborn Tyrant, and some classic green value engines like Tendershoot Dryad and Greater Good. So what's the catch? Well, instead of casting them, we're going to try and trick these bad boys into play, usually by reanimating them. Let's set up the joke, shall we? As you might expect, mono green Reanimator isn't exactly the easiest thing to pull off, so the setup is going to be really important here. In the early game, we want to accomplish one of two things, but preferably both. One, set up our graveyard with mill, discard, and anything else we can muster. And 2, ramp. Green Reanimator spells are hard to come by, and therefore usually comically overcosted, so we'll need a lot of mana to get this machine humming. Meanwhile, we also need to stay alive while faster decks get going ahead of us, and there's another useful bit of setup that we'll talk about a little bit later. For ramp, we have some classics like Rampant Growth, Nature's Lore, and some other much more specific options I'll dig into later when we get to our main synergy lines. To set up our graveyard, we have a small package of early plays like Satyr Wayfinder, Town Greeter, Shigeki, or even Key to the City in a pinch. It's important not to forget that we are a green deck. That means we can draw big bursts of cards using effects like Greater Good, and then just go to discard at the end of turn and pitch our Reanimator targets, which is a super useful play pattern to set us up for later. As for staying alive, I used to play a one-of copy of Lull to help assuage early aggro, but I never really found the time to cast it, so I cut it. If your meta runs a little on the faster side, consider adding a Fog or two, or even just a Wall of Blossoms to keep that Najeela pointed elsewhere for a few turns. Now, at this point, the particularly astute among you will have noticed that there is still a massive glaring hole in the middle of this commander deck. Where is the commander? This deck was inspired by a recent rule change from Edge of Eternities that allowed certain legendary spacecraft to be commanders. It also, however, grandfathered in many legendary vehicles to become legal commanders, including ours, Asika's Chariot. For 4 mana, we get a 4/4 vehicle with crew 4. A relatively steep crew cost, but thankfully, it comes with 2 2/2 cat tokens to fulfill it, and 1 attack trigger. When Asika's Chariot attacks, create a token that's a copy of target token you control. Cool, right? But what does this have to do with the Reanimator deck we've been outlining so far? Well, it turns out a fair few of the Reanimator spells accessible in mono green and colorless actually bring back a token copy of the creature instead of the original, meaning we can clone them repeatedly with the Chariot. For example, Timeless Witness reanimates itself via Eternalize. Mimic Vat does a close approximation of reanimation, and the two big engines we have are Wondrous Crucible and Godpharaoh's Gift, both repeatable engines that token clone cards from our graveyard. This also includes one of my favorite cards in the deck, which even comes with its own sub-package, Lazotep Quarry. It lets us sacrifice any desert to essentially eternalize a creature, and gives us a sack outlet to boot. To support this, we run 4 other utility deserts, and a few ways to find them. As an aside, I think Conduit Pylons is a criminally underplayed card for so many decks. Any deck in 2 or less colors can afford the colorless land pretty easily. Green decks appreciate having an extra, easily fetchable Surveil land. Any graveyardy deck wants a free Surveil. And any deck with a Sand Scout package, even decks that run heavy on Power Stones or other colorless mana sources, can at least appreciate the filtering as an upside to an already passable land. Anyways, tangent over. Try this in your next deck. In addition to token reanimation, we have some other strong synergies with the Chariot to talk about. Traveling Botanist, Siege Ship Agrarian, and Big Boy Kona all love riding in the Chariot for value. And Harvest Season is basically guaranteed better than Kodama's Reach, since you always have 2 cats, and sometimes gets you upwards of 10 lands for 3 mana. We also have a few cards like Bellowing Tangleworm, Unnatural Growth, and Rune of Might to help our commander get its attack trigger more safely. Speaking of our commander, now is also a good time to get into that other useful bit of setup I mentioned earlier, tokens. At face value, Asika's Chariot represents an engine that can make a 2/2 cat every turn. This is the bare minimum, and I consider this to be too weak to act as an early plan. The main reason being that 2/2s fall below the 3 to 4 threshold, where green starts actually caring about creatures. Think Elemental Bond or Garruk's Uprising. As such, I usually don't opt to play it on curve, unless I have a way to at least make a 3/3 token, or something with utility like Clues or the new Landers. You can totally still play it on curve if you have set up for the following turn though, since the earlier you play it, the earlier it overcomes Summoning Sickness and can start attacking. Since I cut my fogs earlier on, these setup tokens are often my main method of surviving the early game, so don't be afraid to block with them if you need. Don't worry, you'll get more juicy tokens soon. Without further ado, it's time to talk about the spice of this deck. What are we reanimating and cloning, and how are we doing it? We have 2 primary methods of making high-quality tokens. The first being the many reanimation engines we discussed earlier, plus the one actual reanimation card, Portal to Phyrexia, and the second being other cloning/cheating effects. These include cards that clone themselves, like Vaultborn Tyrant, Giant Ataphage, or Colonian Twingrove. Cards that replace and or ramp up our commander, like Strionic Resonator, Blade of Selves, Helm of the Host, or City of Death, and my favorite card in the deck, Nexus of Becoming. The main reason Nexus is so good is that it can make a token copy of a creature or an artifact, meaning we can use it to clone our other reanimation engines, like Wondrous Crucible or, God forbid, Portal to Phyrexia itself, to power up our engine to far more than the once-a-turn pace our commander provides. For targets, we have loads of utility packed onto creatures to give us plenty of options. We can clone Steve or Lander tokens for ramp, Satyr Wayfinder for more mill, Outcaster Trailblazer or Regal Force for card draw, Druid of Purification for removal, Tendershoot Dryad or Thunderfoot Baloth to close out games, or even Eternal or Timeless Witness to recur any other value spells, ramp, removal, draw, protection, you name it. As with most Reanimator decks, if you can survive the early game and set up your engine, this deck can be insanely hard to stop. Your commander dodges most board wipes since it usually isn't a creature. You can rebuild quickly via a combination of graveyard synergies and a glut of mana, and you have some of the best recursion spells in Magic. Black wishes it had the breadth of options Eternal Witness gives you. You even get one of my favorite panic buttons in the Great Aurora. It resets all the permanents, including lands, looking at you, Glacial Chasm. It leaves your yard intact, and it synergizes really well with tokens, allowing you to replace them with actual real cards. Since we play lots of lands, and you get to put them back in untapped as part of the spell, you even get to rebuild first. Due to the high volume of mana this deck can make, I've resolved this with 6 floating mana and just blasted back ahead the same turn I cast it. So, that's the deck. All in all, this deck for me represents the pinnacle of battlecruiser Magic. Yeah, if someone saves their Relic of Progenitus for the perfect moment, you might get super blown out. But who cares? You got to crack 6 lander tokens and cheat in a Portal to Phyrexia off of Kona. It just doesn't get more splashy than that. If you or someone you know is looking for an off-the-beaten-path green Timmy deck, send them my way, and I will welcome them to the Church of Green Graveyard. As always, check out the Moxfield link down below for a written primer, updates, and to playtest it for yourself. Feel free to like and subscribe if you feel so inclined, and thanks for watching. Bye!